Great. Thank you, Hillary. And a hearty thank you to Alaska Wilderness League. We've been partners on multiple fronts for years now, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be joining you all this evening. Thanks for tuning in. And this will be pretty low key. I'll ask you all if you can hear me and you can hear the video okay. And if you can't, we'll fix it. But we did test it beforehand, so let's give her a go. I'm going to get this cooking here on as a slideshow in just a sec, and we'll get after it. 1 second. Okay, and here we go. I'm going to share my screen, and you should be able to see a slide that says "Victorious: The Magic of Bristol Bay." Hillary, are you seeing that? Okay, great. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name's Mark Titus. I am coming to you this evening from Seattle, which is on the traditional lands of the Duwamish people here. And it is a thrill to be with you. I am a filmmaker here in Seattle. I've made 2 films prior to this, The Breach and The Wild. And I have a 3rd one as a trilogy in the works called The Turn. I'm also the founder of Ava's Wild, which is the word save spelled backwards. And we're a Seattle benefit company offering food, stories, and experiences that give back directly to protect wild salmon bearing places like Bristol Bay. And today I'm going to start out by showing you the trailer to my 2019 documentary, The Wild, which focuses on the fight to protect Bristol Bay. We'll talk a bit about why this place is so incredibly special and sacred, how I came into this work, and where we go from here. So without further ado, here is the trailer for The Wild.
Everything is connected by water. Sea to cloud, cloud to rain, rain to river, river to sea. When you touch water in one place, you're touching it everywhere. The Pebble Limited Partnership have been trying to construct a copper balloon in the headwaters of Bristol Bay's salmon country for decades, and an ominous threat descended once again into Bristol Bay's future, and also onto mine.
How they can be hatched in these river systems, find their way out to sea, spend 2 or 3 years in the ocean, and come back to the exact same place that they were born. It's absolutely amazing to me how they can do that.
You can't not think about them somewhat mythically.
I think it's valuable to protect all of our wild places. We're running out of them.
If you want to see magic, come to Bristol Bay, Alaska, and you'll see magic.
Do we love salmon? I don't even know if love's a strong enough word. It is who we are. It is who our people have been and who our people will continue to be.
And the statute says if we get a permit, EPA at that point can decide whether it wishes to veto this project. I don't think it will if we get a permit.
Some things are not for sale.
Unless we change our attitude towards wilderness, we're going to go down with the other species. When we lose wild salmon, we're going to lose ourselves too. It's all there in nature, as far as I'm concerned.
We have messed up every other natural run in the world, except this one. And this being the last there is makes me want to pay attention more than I ever had.
And we're going to do it. And they ought to get ready for it.
All right. Spoiler alert. They didn't do it. We'll talk about that here in a little more detail soon. But the Pebble Limited Partnership on January 30th was vetoed by the United States Environmental Protection Agency using the 404C Clean Water Act. And so to step back a minute, kind of give you a broader context, I'm going to just walk you through what is this place for those who've never been there, or those who haven't seen the films or know anybody that lives in Bristol Bay. Bristol Bay is located at the convergence of the Pacific Ocean and the Bering Sea. And as you can see on the map here, it's a little inlet. It's a big inlet. Everything's big in Alaska, but there's 8 major river systems that are flowing into Bristol Bay from here, which is the reason why the salmon runs in this area are so prodigious, and they are the engine for all the other life that exists in the region. The unique location of Bristol Bay provides a complex and a diverse environment that's characterized by a mix of marine and freshwater ecosystems. As you can see in this picture here, the region's climate is also influenced by the nearby Aleutian Islands in the Gulf of Alaska, which creates a temperate and humid environment that supports a wide range of plant and animal life. The bay's geology is also an essential factor that contributes to its thriving ecosystem. The region's mix of volcanic, sedimentary, and metamorphic rock formations has led to the formation of unique landscapes, super unique, including towering mountain ranges, glacial valleys, and vast wetlands. And you'll note here the photographer for each of these wonderful, stunning photos is noted in the lower right on these pictures. They're all friends and people that have contributed to the films. These diverse landscapes also provide rich habitat that's connected by water everywhere in Bristol Bay, as you can see on the left. And anytime you fly over this place, you see everything is connected by water there. And that supports lots of different unique species of plants and animals, like the bears of the Katmai National Preserve, which is just a tremendous place. If you're into fauna like this, it's really hard to describe. This amazing photograph by my friend Drew Hamilton is lovely and gorgeous and stunning, and it still doesn't quite capture what it's like there. It also, of course, especially supports the salmon, wild salmon in Bristol Bay. Sockeye salmon in particular return here every summer in the tens of millions. That it's more than what the Columbia system was pumping out back in its heyday. In fact, in 2022, 80 million sockeye salmon returned to spawn and bring new life to the region. That's an all-time record since they started recording this. This is a photo here at Brooks Falls, and it's probably the most photographed and most famous bear country you've ever seen. There's a little more video later down the line here of it, but it's hard to get your head around the biomass. They just keep coming and coming, and they feed literally everything in this bioregion. It's absolutely magical. So in addition to the half of the world's sockeye supply of sockeye salmon, you see in the background here, Bristol Bay is home to all 5 Pacific salmon species, including chum and pink, chinook, and coho. That's a coho on the screen you're looking at, and the sockeye behind it. That's a big coho, by the way. This region's salmon populations are among the most productive in the world. It's probably accurate to say the most productive in the world, with millions of fish, millions of each of these types of salmon returning to spawn in the bay every year. Important to note that the thriving animals and salmon of Bristol Bay are also a testament to the region's long history of sustainable human practices. Yupik, Denana, Alutiiq, Athabascan people have been in this region for 10,000 years and various forms and various locations, and they have been curing and eating and surviving and thriving because of these salmon, because of the gift. These indigenous communities have been living here for these thousands of years and developed a deep understanding of the bay's ecology and the importance of maintaining its balance. So really, this all ultimately leads to this central nexus of salmon. And this is kind of the jumping off point for my fascination and wonder with these creatures, enough so to devote the last 13 years of my life to protecting Bristol Bay and telling stories about it. It all centers around salmon for me. And I came to this as a young man. I fished in Bristol Bay, and I worked in the commercial processing in Bristol Bay. And when I was there, this is this is dating me, and speaks to the gray in my beard, but this was back in 1991. And I was reading David James Duncan at the time. And if you don't know him, I hope you pick up some of his books. This quote comes from My Story is Told by Water, which I have and is dog-eared all over the place. This quote really says it all for me. He speaks in a way about salmon that went right to my heart, and it wound in the thread of these salmon that I was in love with. And really, when I started to learn more and come into connection with salmon, this image by Ray Troll, Alaska's seminal artist of all fishy things, and especially salmon, really says it all to me in this beautiful life cycle called eternal salmon. They give their very lives so life itself can continue. And to me, that speaks to a sacrifice through action. Their death, their sacrifice is necessary and beautiful, and it provides life for 137 different creatures and makes Bristol Bay thrive into this sacred place that it is today. And in Bristol Bay, all of this life has been facing destruction over the last 30 years in a fight to keep North America's largest copper, gold, and molybdenum mine out of Bristol Bay's headwaters. This issue is the centerpiece of my first two feature documentaries, The Breach and The Wild. You saw the trailer for The Wild. And this clip you're about to watch talks about then Pebble CEO Tom Collier, who you saw in the trailer, and his cohort's desire to mine this magic place no matter what. And you get a little bit more of the magic part as well. So here's the clip.
By we, Mr. Collier is referring to the Canadian corporation that owns Pebble. 80% of Bristol Bay, Alaska residents oppose the mine, but there's over $500 billion of copper and gold here. So the forces to dig it out are motivated and strong. Thank God the love for this place is even stronger.
How they can be hatched in these river systems, find their way out to sea, spend 2 or 3 years in the ocean, and come back to the exact same place that they were born. It's absolutely amazing to me how they can do that.
Pumping protein back into the environment, bears, the whales, anything that can eat them, including us.
So you can't not think about them somewhat mythically.
Any migration that you can ever witness of nature, it's a phenomenon. If you want to see magic, come to Bristol Bay, Alaska, and you'll see magic. It's still here on Earth.
Well, there it is, the Bristol Bay magic that still causes a flutter in my heart every time I watch it. And to go back a few steps, so here's how I came into this work. That's me. I'm the little guy on the left, and that's my dad holding my arm there, and our dog who's going after a ball, looks like somehow. But the hanging next to my dad is, quote, in air quotes, my first king salmon. It's a 30-pound king that we caught out of Nia Bay on the coast of Washington State, my home state here. And allegedly, my dad brought the fish up next to the boat, and I had this little Snoopy Zebco Fred Meyer rod and reel kit that he got me. And as he brought the fish next to the boat, I attempted to harpoon the Chinook, and the rod went straight down to the bottom. My dad netted the Chinook, and what came out of it was this lifelong fascination and love for me, for these beings that, again, sacrifice themselves so life can continue. So I fish for them most every Saturday summer morning out of Edmonds, Washington here growing up. And I fell in love with them. And the thought of life without them really started breaking my heart. Cut to many years later, I was working as a corporate film commercial producer, and I was on an airplane reading a book called Mountain in the Clouds by Bruce Brown, which is an absolutely incredible elegiac book about the dearth of salmon here in the Pacific Northwest and how they have come to flagging numbers here. And I knew in this moment of reading this forward in the book, I had a flash forward and flashback. I could see 10 years ahead of my life, because I remembered that in reading this first part of this book, that we had a family friend named Russ Bush who was suffering from stage 4 glioblastoma. He had brain cancer and he wasn't going to live much longer. And I knew that I might have a chance to film him before he passed and tell his story, because he had represented the Owa people here in Washington state. And for 40 years, the struggle to remove the illegal salmon blocking dams out of the Owa River. That was the basis of how the breach came into be. And that's the basis of how I ended up going to Bristol Bay eventually. But what really I came to learn out of this, especially in the context of reading Mountain in the Clouds, and then subsequently Dr. Dave Montgomery's book, King of Fish, which is incredible. And if you really are interested in salmon, I can't recommend that more highly. He listed 5 H's as the reason for salmon eradication: harvest, habitat, hatcheries, hydro, and history. Now, harvest, of course, is overfishing. Habitat is stuff like, straightening rivers, like the natural flow of rivers and armoring them and causing deleterious effects for salmon spawning habitat. Hatcheries, boy, you want to get in a knife fight up here in salmon country. You mentioned hatcheries in a bar some Friday night. They are ultimately deleterious for wild salmon, but they have also been the lifeline for fishermen up here in the Northwest. It's a highly contentious issue. But the fifth, and then hydro, of course, hydro are dams, and dams, as we know, have been producing what folks have categorized as clean energy to this point, but we're now realizing those dams maybe were not all well thought out as we thought they were. And then the fifth H is history, and that's where Bristol Bay comes in. Are we going to learn from the past? Are we going to learn from the mistakes we've made that have left salmon country in ruin every time people have colonized and come into the salmon country? Or are we going to, in fact, step up and protect the last fully intact wild salmon system on Earth? So ultimately, we were looking at a situation of, in the breach as a film, of restoration versus protection. We used the model of the Elwha River, which in its case took $350 million, 40 years, hundreds of people, organizations, the Elwha tribe led it all. But it was a massive struggle and it almost didn't even happen. Versus a place like Bristol Bay that's perfect, pristine, completely intact the way that it is right now. So that place, as we know, is still intact and now is afforded a modicum of protection and has a fishery that could last forever if we choose to let it. So, and a word on that now, the Bristol Bay fishery as a food source has learned from the mistakes of the lower 48. They have actually written into the Alaska State Constitution a mandate that salmon must be protected as a resource. And so what that means practically here in Bristol Bay is that they have a program of escapement. And escapement means that enough adult salmon coming home to spawn and die they're going to allow and mandate to allow enough of these salmon to get up into the river, millions of them, before they allow the first net to be dropped. And so they ensure that these salmon are being taken care of, and the fishermen are all on board with this and actively enforce this. Now, salmon, coming back to this central nexus of this region, they are the gift. They're the gift here throughout our bioregion of salmon country. The sustainable relationship between Pacific salmon and Native Americans derived not from ecology, but from an economy based on the age-old concept of the gift and a belief system that treated all parts of the earth, plants, animals, rocks, as equal members of a community. That's from Jim Likatowicz's book, Salmon Without Rivers. So, just to ponder this a minute, trees and rivers and salmon as members of our community, how would that be different than the dynamic we currently find ourselves in as we label these things just as resources? What if we looked at them as a relationship, a symbiotic type of relationship? How would our relationship with salmon and with the habitat that we need and they need to progress be different? Well, folks like in salmon country, passing on and and giving salmon as the gift they are, and as they demonstrate for us by giving their lives so life continues, they are the gift. Folks like the late great Yupik activist pictured here, Bobby Andrew, who's featured in my first film, The Breach, understood this when he said, the river is our grocery store. And you will find in every community in Bristol Bay, and quite honestly, throughout Alaska and salmon country, that this act that the salmon do is perpetuated in the next level with people who receive that gift and then give it away to others. Elders are given the first share of salmon when they return every summer, and so on. And so in Bristol Bay, passed on and gifted, and salmon as a gift look like this. The more you gave, the wealthier you were as a human. And the giving of these salmon demonstrated with their very lives, it empowered coastal indigenous communities to thrive through their art, economy, and deep culture that continues on right now to this very day. So we took The Breach on a 25-city tour across the country through theaters everywhere, audiences from, as I was telling Hillary, from 400 people to 2 people in Miami. It didn't matter. People were fascinated by the story of salmon. And in 2015, when we wrapped that tour, things looked like things were pretty stable for Bristol Bay. The EPA, then under the directive of the Obama administration, had in fact created a preemptive veto using the 404C. That was soon to change. And what happened in 2016 really illustrated the personal story that I was going through. And it went through grief, honestly. That's how The Wild, my second film, came about. And you know, there's no political association with this at all. But what happened to me in the span of 3 days was November of 2016. My mom got diagnosed with breast cancer on day 1. My grandma, Dorothy, who was a soulmate to me, went into hospice the next day. And on the 3rd day, we had a presidential election that brought in a new president in 2016 that, for me and for others who had worked on the Bristol Bay issue, we instantly knew that Bristol Bay was going to be on open season again. And that's exactly what happened. And so for me, I went through the series of all these 3 things and some other things that were going on in my life. I treated the grief that I was feeling with alcohol. It was something that had been in my family as a social lubricant, and most of my friends. And it took me down and took me completely under to a place that really was at the edge of oblivion. And after heading to the hospital in May of 2017 to save my life, and thanks to my wife and a handful of others who loved me when I could not love myself, I'll be celebrating 6 years of sobriety May 3rd of this year. But ultimately, that story then led into and was incorporated into my second feature documentary, The Wild, which you've seen the trailer for at the beginning here. And the damn thing almost didn't even get done from the get-go, because 55 days into recovery, after going into treatment, I'm standing at the airport with 12 cases of gear, and I didn't think I could do it. I had a panic attack, and I thought, oh my God, what happens if I relapse? What happens if I freak out there? What happens? All the unknowns. Well, something outside of me, and I still think to this day it was the salmon themselves, nudged me spiritually to get on that airplane. And if you've ever been to Bristol Bay, you know that strange and beautiful and sometimes mystical kind of things happen there. Well, that's exactly what happened. One thing led to the next. And the person I was supposed to meet out there for my first interview, I literally ran into him, Ole Olson, as I got off the plane in Dillingham. And he welcomed me into his home. He fed me. He put me up for several nights. Somehow I made it out to the boat that I was supposed to be fishing and filming on for the next 10 days. these little series of small synchronistic things started happening. And I knew even before that trip was over that we had another movie in the works here. And so what ended up happening is you watch this going upriver, up the Alagnak River, like a salmon does in Bristol Bay, that we finished the film and in 2019 premiered at the Seattle International Film Festival, and then went on to a strong festival run. We won a lot of awards, went all around the world. And we had a 50-city tour planned for that film to once again go into theaters across the United States, and especially here in the West, and tell the story of Bristol Bay and really get people enthusiastic about defending Bristol Bay and what they could do. And what we found was, of course, we ran into COVID, like everybody else did in 2020, and that shut that whole thing down. And so we were forced to pivot to a virtual tour, which really looked a lot like what we're doing right now. We would show the film online, and a lot of people watch it. Thousands of people still watch the film and got involved with it. But through it all, there was a strange and beautiful alliance. And that this is one that has been going on for years. As we all know, who are been in conservation battles and work, that oftentimes it's hard to coalesce people that have different agendas. And in this case, in Bristol Bay's case, people that had formerly been competitive all came together at the same time. So we're talking about committed NGOs, just like Alaska Wilderness League. Tribes obviously came together and have led the fight all this time. The commercial fishing community came together with the sport fishing community and the sport hunting community. As a matter of fact, people that watched the film around the country in this virtual tour, we got a lot of surprising and incredible support and feedback from this conservative and very vocal sport fishing and sport hunting community. So much so, in fact, that that in the November of 2021, the Trump administration's Army Corps of Engineers denied the Pebble Mine a permit, and a permit they desperately needed. And it really, for all the world, came from and was bolstered by that sport and sportsman and woman community. So at the end of all this, I, as a person, found a bottom. We explore that in the movie, in the wild, and ultimately we included my story. My team and I included my story in that movie for three important reasons. One, it was because it's what happened. That's the most important thing. It was the truth, and that's really important in a documentary. Secondly, it made for a better story. And third, it was a perfect metaphor. My addict, my alcoholic, was saying the same thing that these guys at the Pebble Mine were saying, which was, this time it'll be different. And we know with Bristol Bay, that's just not the case. So it wasn't fast or pretty or popular or even outwardly desirable, but hitting that bottom for me, and I think, in a metaphorical sense with Bristol Bay, was where we needed to go in order to get where we are now. And salmon demonstrate this. And this is what it looks like. This is what transformation really looks like in nature. It's a glorious mess, which brings, a sense of grief sometimes, pondering a future without the gift. These salmon, at this terminal fishery in Bristol Bay, they go upriver, they spawn, they die, they rush into this and give new life. And this death and decay, this bottom, nourishes everything. 137 different creatures, even the trees, which, as we know, are now transforming to burst forth with life once again. And they make this. This is what this region looks like. And the celebration part of all this is this victory that we are celebrating right now that happened for Bristol Bay on January 30th. It's been a 30-year battle since minerals were discovered in Bristol Bay at the Pebble Mine site, and the people who have been in this fight for all this time, the people that have lived there for thousands of years, whose lives and now their new children have been born into this fight. They've been at this for so long and have led the way and have inspired me and so many others to continue on to keep this place beautiful the way that it is. And that means keep it as a pristine ecosystem and not as an industrial district, and especially not an industrial extractive mining district. But here's the thing, it's never going to be over. I've been writing a lot in my newsletters and on my podcasts and talking about this, but as long as there's greed in the hearts of men, there will be men coming and looking to exploit the resources that are in the ground there. They'll come up with a new cute shiny name for whatever the next version of the Pebble Mine is. And as a matter of fact, there's new mining claims right now, and they're gaslighting in the name of green energy, saying that we absolutely have to tear this up in order to have national security. I would argue, and many others would argue, that Bristol Bay is a matter of national security, of national food security. It's a system that creates food all by itself. All we have to do is leave it alone. So moving on to the next slide here, this is an image of the scene here, minutes from where I live, above I-90. There's a really cool, I love it, but it's a series of metal salmon statues over the freeway. And it's a reminder to me that down here in the lower 48, we've lost so much. And it's my intense feeling that we need to go through a sense of grief, not push it away or pretend everything is great as it always has been, but and simply lionizing our icons of this region without acknowledging what we've done to them, that there is some grief here. But Bristol Bay doesn't have to be this way. We got to look at it. We got to feel it. We must let our hearts break for the teeming silver waves of new life that used to come into Puget Sound and all the rivers all over salmon country here in the West, and realize that Bristol Bay can and must be protected permanently into the future. And we must use the grief that we feel as fuel. We must act. Which brings me to where I am now in my journey and where we are and on my team and the folks that I'm working with. I'm rooted in this saying by my old friend David James Duncan: trees and mountains are holy, rain and rivers are holy, salmon are holy. For this reason, I will fight with all my might to keep them alive. That's why I'm here. This is the work that I do. And what this looks like right now is in building community and resilience. Around the time that The Wild came out, my second film, concurrent with it, I founded a company called Ava's Wild. Again, that's the word save spelled backwards. And it's a for-profit public benefit company in the model of Patagonia that gives back to indigenous-led efforts to protect wild and sacred salmon-bearing habitat throughout salmon country, starting with Bristol Bay. So what we practically do is we sell wild salmon from Bristol Bay. We ship it to people in the country, in the lower 48, and we serve it to restaurants here in the Pacific Northwest. And 10% of our profits go directly to these indigenous-led efforts to protect wild salmon habitat. And specifically, we're donating to the Bristol Bay Education Foundation right now, which gives scholarships to four-year colleges, universities, and to trade schools for Bristol Bay's indigenous young people. Essentially, giving the people who know this place best the tools they need to protect it in perpetuity. And so, in addition to selling the salmon, we also are going to be launching a media platform that obviously will carry my films, but also curating lots of other people's series and films and narrative films that are specifically from or produced by or have relevance to storytelling here inside salmon country that venerates the wild in our own hearts and, of course, on our planet. Why does this concept work? Well, it really came from those tours of the breach that back in 2015, when I would be standing up on stage and folks would ask, what can I do to help? I didn't really have a perfect answer for them. The best I could come up with was to write your legislator and obviously dig deep and give to your favorite NGO like AWL. And folks would say, I've already done that. I want to do more. I want to do extra. And we'd say, okay, well, took some time, but came up with this idea that you can, in fact, buy wild salmon from Bristol Bay. And by doing that, you're supporting a completely sustainable business that's already there, that doesn't depend on a resource extraction business like the Pebble Mine for jobs up there. And ultimately, that experience of watching a film and feeling the emotional draw and the emotional transformation of watching that movie is what led folks to want to do that in the first place. So the next step for me is The Breach came out in 2014, The Wild came out in 2019, and I'm completing the third and final film in this trilogy, which is going to be called The Turn. And The Turn refers to that mysterious time when wild salmon somehow, thousands of miles out in the middle of the ocean, know it's time to turn and come home to their home rivers. It also refers to us. We're at a moment in time in human history where it's very clear what we've been doing for the last 200 years is not jiving with the natural rhythm of the earth. Are we going to turn into that natural rhythm together, like a murmuration of birds, or like a school of salmon? Or are we, in fact, going to continue going down this path of taking what we want and leaving the rest for dead, which ultimately is where it's going to leave us? So with The Turn, we'd like to have this film, and it's a documentary, so things, you never know. It has a mind of its own, but we're shooting for a release in late 2024, early 2025. And what we're going to do is, like we were going to do with The Wild, and hopefully there's not another global pandemic, knocking on wood, we're going to take this film out with a 50-city tour, and we're going to be bringing a food truck along like we were going to do with The Wild. We'll be serving folks Bristol Bay salmon. We'll be telling the story. We'll be offering a virtual reality experience, and we'll be feeding people Bristol Bay sockeye salmon. So people can literally have a little taste of it, a sacrament, if you will, from Bristol Bay, take a VR experience of it, watch the film, feel emotionally charged by it, and then continue that by watching films and storytelling inside of the portal that we're offering, and continuing to buy salmon at your local favorite restaurants or delivered to your home. And a portion of every single one of those transactions will go back to folks building the future for Bristol Bay and other parts of salmon country. So ultimately, as we look at our favorite anadromous creatures, cousins here, I guess what I'm asking is, can we be like wild salmon? Can we become the human alchemists for this generation? Can we turn struggle into resilience? From where I sit, we have many opportunities before us to grieve and look at what's happened, but then most importantly, to take action for the salmon we purport to love. Especially, I feel the two most important things to celebrate life and return wild salmon to their birth houses. One, we've been talking about this whole talk here, protect Bristol Bay. It is the last fully intact stronghold in North America, if not the world. And the second piece that we're going to be exploring in depth, the last third of the movie in The Turn, the final film, is going to be about the Snake River and breaching the lower four Snake River dams. Are we going to do that? Are we going to follow this example these salmon show us right now and do these things that are necessary to keep that gift coming? What we know is that for now, Bristol Bay is protected. And this is a huge victory, and we have to celebrate it because these things do not come often. It's a durable protection under the US EPA's 404C Clean Water Act. But we can't stop there. We need to continue to support and laud and urge Senators Murkowski and Sullivan from Alaska and our own lawmakers from wherever we are to protect Bristol Bay, to offer a layer of permanent protection over what's already there for the entire region, because what we know as of this moment is that the Alaska Department of Natural Resources in March 3rd, issued a public notice of an application from an outfit called Stewie Mines, LLC, which, if you can see on this map here, the Pebble site is up here, which is, as we know, now afforded protection under the EPA. But this Stewie Mines site that is being, it's a new application to mine in the Bristol Bay watershed along Cascana Creek, which is right here, southwest of the proposed Pebble project, and outside of the scope of what the EPA has said is under afforded protection right now. So not only that, but this project at Cascanic with vis-a-vis the Stewie Mines is one of 200 projects in exploration in the area of the Bristol Bay watershed. So it's not anywhere near where the Pebble Mine was and is now defunct. But what we know for sure is that this threat isn't over until we get permanent protection, and we gotta keep showing up and doing the work, the kind of work that Alaska Wilderness League is devoted to. And I will be along. I'm an ardent supporter and will continue to be, and we'll be working side by side in partnership as I complete my 3rd film and as we work together to protect these places, because what we know is that these salmon are the gift. They're the gift to the people that have been in this region for millennia and can continue to be in perpetuity. The salmon runs all over the rest of the West have been declining. In Bristol Bay, they've been going up despite climate change. So I'll leave you with this today, that this salmon are the gift. They are to me, they are to the indigenous people of Bristol Bay, as they have been to the coastal tribes up and down throughout salmon country. And they will keep coming to us. They will keep coming as a gift if we let them. They need a few simple things: clean, cold water and gravel, and they'll keep coming. And with that, thank you. I want to thank you for showing up today. I want to thank you for caring, and you can connect with me. I think that Hillary's probably put it in the chat, but you can scan that QR code if you like. And I'm going to stop the share right now, and we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was amazing to see all this footage of Bristol Bay, and yeah, just really excited to have you on and sharing your story. I do also want to thank everyone again who has submitted a public comment and lifted your voice to stop Pebble Mine. We had so many of our Alaska Wilderness League supporters contributing to this effort, and it makes all the difference. On another note, I also know that you guys, most of you have been aware because of all the emails that we've been sending about what's been going on with our Willow project. And both wanted to thank you for your donations and financial support that helped make these Geography of Hope episodes possible, but also for the outpouring of support to help us stop Willow. And in the next week or two, we'll be sending out some more updates about what's happening with that, because I know people have been really concerned. The common thread between both of these regions are just the amazing way that in Alaska, the land can really support the livelihoods of so many, and it's really unlike any other part of our country. So we will continue to fight to make sure that this is possible. And with that, I'm hoping that Mark can start answering some questions. So Mark, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the chat and wanted to tackle one right away. Otherwise, I was just gonna start throwing some your way.
Fire away. Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so one of the questions was about if you think that it is possible to, I mean, I know you compared the restoration versus the protection. How possible is it that we can see some salmon returning to the lower 48? And how would that be possible?
It's possible because we're watching it happen in front of our very eyes. The Elwha River has been nothing short of magnificent. it was special in the fact that it had, it was 80 miles of the river was inside of a national park, the Olympic National Park. But those two salmon blocking dams completely stopped those runs, the big salmon, the big kings in particular, from getting into that habitat. Well, once those dams came down, all 5 species of Pacific salmon and steelhead have come back, roaring back into the system. The eelgrass has taken root again at the mouth. The near shore is thriving with forage fish, and it's a nursery for the juveniles. So ultimately, we are watching a fast-tracked restoration miracle happening on the Elwha, and it's by giving these fish cold, clear water. What we know about the Snake River is that there's 5,500 miles at elevation during climate change. It means it's cold water, that a pristine habitat that's available. So if you kind of do that overlay of what's happening on the Elwha, and you magnet X to 5,500 miles, you know, there's a lot of data that backs this up, but as a layman's sort of view, you're giving salmon the very best shot that we can possibly give them in this generation. And the same thing is happening on the Klamath as well. That's an incredible story that's happening right now. And my fellow filmmaker and friend Shane Anderson is completing a feature documentary. He's literally filming today down there right now.
That was actually what the question referenced, was that river in particular. So yeah. And then another supporter asked, they referenced that the Senate voted to overturn Biden's Waters of the US rule. But while we think that Biden will likely veto that resolution, are there ways that that kind of additional laws being protected being brought forth are going to help Bristol Bay or other regions more? What water rules or others are you paying attention to?
I can't speak to the issue today. That's also news to me. But what I can speak to is knowledge of, yes, there is an active discussion that is being led by Alaska's senior senator, Senator Murkowski, about a permanent protection plan for Bristol Bay that would involve creating a national fisheries area throughout. And it would involve some semblance of a trade between state land and federal land. I can't really go into much more than that, but it is something that's actively happening right now, and we are highly encouraging the both of Alaska's entire delegation, for that matter, including Congressman Peltola. So.
There are a couple questions actually about this sort of idea, and one of them was just around the new project. Would the protections that they're talking about also impact like new projects since they're within that watershed, or are there different variations that might or might not?
Yeah, so that's a great point. Whereas this new potential mining claim falls outside of the scope of protection that the current EPA veto offers, it would be included under what the broadly discussed national fisheries area that would encompass the 8 watersheds, the 8 river systems within Bristol Bay. So obviously we are all pushing for that. And as you can imagine, the folks that 80% of Bristol Bay's residents are against this, are against resource extraction in their watersheds. 65% of Alaskans are. So it's kind of like, hey guys, we've been here. What aren't you understanding about this, about the will of the people here?
Yeah, that's great summary. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there are any other questions about. I'm seeing another question coming in about Willow, and I think we will have more information about Willow in the upcoming couple of weeks. We're in a little bit of a holding pattern while we have our lawsuit going on, and so what I definitely can say is that Alaska Wilderness League is going to do everything it can to stop the project, and we have not given up hope. And we will also continue to fight any additional projects that come up in the Arctic to stop oil development from going forward there. So we'll keep you guys updated. A little bit of a related, but also Mark, I know that you're more of the fish focus. Someone has asked about green energy development in Alaska. And I'm given that we're talking a little bit about the like removal of dams. Do you guys talk at all about sort of green energy development in Alaska and what that potentially looks like in your organization?
I'm really glad you brought that up. An interview I'm going to be doing for the Turn in this summer is with my friend Alexander Salmon, who is tribal leader in Igiagi, village on the Kwijak River. And its place is remarkable. This is a woman-led system of government, and it is self-contained. And to the point of energy, they have been the pioneers in creating a run-of-river hydro system that is essentially a turbine that is in the middle of the river that gets activated after the salmon smolt have gone down. So they make sure the little guys get out and it runs. And then once the returning fish come back, they pause it again. And so this is one of multiple systems that are all in the works. And Alexander is going to be speaking about that, about tribal sovereignty. We've got some other examples of that with the Nez Perce and the Snake River as well. But in Bristol Bay in particular, yes, it's an active conversation. It's on everyone's mind. Fuel is expensive. It's a generator system. It's dirty. It's old. It's antiquated. It's not efficient. And from my perspective, that's also one of the things that we intend to donate to is that bolstering that green energy economy up there.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that takes us to the end of our questions. So I might, unless any other ones come up right now, you can type while I'm still talking, but I wanted to just let everyone know that we're going to have another Geography of Hope on May 2nd. And that's going to be with author Kim Hecox, and he's going to talk about the power of story in both fiction and nonfiction to address some of Alaska's most difficult conservation issues. And he's going to focus on the rain-soaked world of Southeast Alaska, the Tongass, and the salmon-eating wolves that live there. So that should be a really interesting topic and also ties into today's work. Yeah, and I just really appreciate everyone's participation tonight. Mark, this has been so educational and inspirational. I hope everyone leaves feeling like you contributed something to this victory and that we can move forward having more victories ahead. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for the opportunity to come and tell this story. And for folks that want to get involved with my work, again, there's a link tree up in the chat right now. You can actually watch both The Breach and The Wild for free. We took it out from behind the paywall. They're on YouTube and available to you. Please watch, please share, feel free. And if you feel like you want to go a step further, if you happen to be in the Pacific Northwest, we're having a gala event April 26th. There's a link. Please consider yourself invited. And if you'd like to become an investor in the work we're doing with Ava's Wild, there's also a link in there. You can invest literally as a bona fide investor in the company for as little as $100. And we'd love to have you on board. It's your
Can
company.
you give gift salmon memberships to people?
Gift salmon memberships.
So like my dad who loves to eat salmon all the time, can I have salmon sent to him?
Absolutely. We do
Awesome.
salmon subscriptions all over the country, and we got a lot more restaurants that we're serving here soon too. So that people seem to dig the story and the fact that we're, trying to be supremely mindful of where this storytelling comes from, where the salmon comes from, and giving back to that source.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great night, and I look forward to talking to everyone again soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.